Shalom, Facebook Alive folks, and our YouTube friends as well. We put this on YouTube now, guys and gals. I hope you knew that. We're on Zoom. We're on Zoom too. We got everybody from Bet Yeshua connecting, and I love doing Bible studies this way. Actually, I love doing Bible studies in person, but hey, there's Taro. All right. So, but this is, I guess, the next best way to do things. So, we're in Revelation chapter 18. Let's get to it, folks. You guys ready?
Yep.
All right. Sounds good. We were talking about Babylon the Great in chapter 17 and chapter 18. Babylon the Great in chapter 17 is the one world religion. And I believe it's going to be run by the Roman Catholic Church and Pope. That seems to be the gist of what's going on, but that may be wrong. That's possible. We don't know. The Bible doesn't say exactly what it is, but it doesn't matter. One person's going to be running the show. All religions are going to be involved, okay? All religions that are not believers, I should say, not Christian. So they're all going to be as one, and all roads lead to God. Have you ever heard that before?
Yeah.
Well, they do in a way. In a way, they all lead to God, because everybody's going to meet Jesus one way or the other.
Yeah, but not the right way, Rich. That's the whole point.
Right. So
they believe all roads lead to God, and all religions lead to God, but we know that the only way to get there is through Yeshua. So that's the first half. That's chapter 17, and that's the first half of the tribulation period. By mid-trib, that one world religion dies. Okay, anti-Messiah, the 10 kings wipe it out, and then they cause all those people then to worship the anti-Messiah and also Satan. Okay, now we're in chapter 18. Last week we ended right about chapter, verse 10. So we're going to pick up in 9 and 10. Let's get Samson. Would you read 9 and 10 of chapter 18? Remember, now this is the one world government and one world religion all tied up together, called the great city Babylon, or Babylon the Great, which anti-Messiah now is running. At the end of this Jacob's trouble is when it will be destroyed, and so chapter 18 is talking about its destruction. Now in verse 9 and 10 we'll pick up where we left off. Let's see, let's just pick up 9 and 10, okay?
Okay. Number 9? 9, 10?
Yes,
Both?
9 and 10 both.
Okay. Where the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, "Woe, woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon! In 1 hour your doom has come."
Yes. So these folks, the first group of mourners for Babylon, which are the kings, they are standing at a distance. So last week we talked about how evil people that have evil friends, when they get in trouble, they always stand at a distance. They don't help them truly. Their friends only think of themselves. So this great city of Babylon we discussed it's either a metaphor for Rome, or it's the literal city of Babylon, or it's another major city that's going to be made by the anti-Messiah as its headquarters to the world. So, but we're talking about whether this is going to be Rome or the actual rebuilt city of Babylon. Babylon is no longer anymore. So it says here, though, in verse 10, in 1 hour her judgment has come. So it's a sudden destruction. Verse 9 talks about the smoke, and of course fire coming from her burning. So she is going to be destroyed very quickly, suddenly, and there's fire, there's smoke, and they see it from a distance away. So that's what 1 hour means. It just means quick, decisive, swift, that kind of thing. So now let me give you just a little quick history of Babylon, and then we're going to get to some of the Tanakh scriptures about Babylon And we're going to come back to Revelation, go through the rest of the chapter, I hope, and then you can decide, you guys can decide if Babylon is the ancient city of Babylon that's going to be rebuilt, or is it Rome, or is it some other major city around the world, okay? So Babylon, now we're going to King Sennacherib. You know that name, Sennacherib, he's in the Bible. And Babylon was completely razed in 689 BC. That means, just like the city of Jerusalem, it got razed. I call it bulldozed, because nowadays you just bulldoze a building or bulldoze a city and it just is completely wiped out. Razing, back then what they do is they put dirt and sand on top. And so it's just dirt and sand on top of a destroyed city. But his successor, Esarhaddon, rebuilt the city of Babylon after 689 BC and its destruction, or its razing. So the city was rebuilt and it thrived somewhat. By 275 BC, it became a desolate city. Okay? The citizens were transferred to another region around the world. Then Christianity was introduced to Mesopotamia in the 1st and 2nd centuries. And Babylon then became a seat of one of the bishops of the Church of the East. And it was there for hundreds of years. So by mid-7th century, the Muslim Empire then invaded Babylon and then took it over. And what they did was they dissolved the city. They just left it. Took the people out and it was dissolved. Now, some of Babylon has been rebuilt this day, but only to commemorate Saddam Hussein and Nebuchadnezzar. You remember Saddam Hussein, leader in Iraq? He was rebuilding Babylon, and but he didn't get very far in that project. But they were commemorating him and Nebuchadnezzar. But today it's just the ruins. Okay, so you can go and visit if you like. There's some ruins there. And, people just go and visit. And that's pretty much what Babylon is now. So it has been destroyed a couple of times in its history, been rebuilt, was dissolved, and now it's just the ruins. So interesting, very interesting. So, have the prophecies been fulfilled? That's the question about Babylon. Let's check it out. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 13. Verse 6 through 13. I want somebody to tackle that. That's a lot of verses. Read out loud. I'm just going to read through all those verses straight through. Isaiah 13, verse 6 through 13. Go ahead. David, is you there?
Yeah, I'll get it. All right. Well, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, all hands will limp. Every man's heart will melt, and they will be afraid. Pangs and sorrows will take hold of them. They will be in the path as a woman in childbirth. They will be amazed at one another. Their faces will be flames. Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. And he will destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause its light to shine. I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will halt the arrogance of the proud. I will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a mortal more rare than fine gold, a man more than the golden wedge of Ophir. Therefore, I will shake the heavens, and the earth will move out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of her fierce anger.
All right, very good. Thank you. This is an oracle concerning Babylon. It's the burden of Babylon, okay? And in verse 6, we just started there, but it does begin in verse 1, of course. But wail, for the day of the Lord is near. So I wanted you to start with that scripture because the day of the Lord is talking about the day of the Lord. Now we have a connection between the day of the Lord and the destruction of Babylon. The day of the Lord is speaking of Jacob's trouble, the 7-year tribulation period. So its destruction is coming from the Almighty, all right? The day of the Lord, verse 9, is coming, right? To make the land a desolation. Sinners will be exterminated. Verse 10. You guys remember those verses at all? Look, the stars of the heaven will not flash their lights. The sun will be dark. The moon will be dark. That reminds us of what?
True.
Yeah, the end of the tribulation period, there is going to be a few days worth of darkness. It speaks of that in Matthew chapter 24. So then in verse 13, at the fury of the Lord of hosts, in the day of his burning anger. So jump down to verse 19 in the same chapter. And Babylon, the beauty of kingdoms and the glory of the Chaldeans' pride, will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation. Okay, so even though it also in verse 17 talks about the Medes, because the Medo-Persian Empire, also came in and took over Babylon. But this connection now with the day of the Lord makes this, bringing it right into Revelation, book of Revelation. You see that connection? So how do we discuss it? How do we understand it? Well, like I said, look at the history of Babylon. Babylon was raised in 689 BC. Are these verses talking about that raising? It
Well,
says,
in verse 19, it says the Chaldeans' pride. So the Chaldeans were the Babylonians that came and took Israel captive.
yeah, right.
So-
Babylon was
so
connected
right-
with them, yeah.
So right there's a connection that indicates that it's the city of Babylon
Yes,
that's mentioned there.
right, right. And then will be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. So was Babylon overthrown like Sodom and Gomorrah was overthrown? That's a good question.
Well,
It will never be inhabited or lived in from generation to generation. Well, after 689 BC, it was lived in. They rebuilt the city and they lived in it again. So it's not talking about that destruction in 689 BC or in 275 BC. It became a desolate city then. So it's saying after its destruction, then it will never be inhabited again. And just from these verses right here. Now, let's jump to 19. 19 through 20. Look at 22. Or no, look at 21. But desert creatures will lie down there, and their houses will be full of owls. Ostriches also will live there, and shaggy goats will frolic there. Remember last week we talked about the shaggy goats. It's actually talking about the goat demons. So this is going to be a place where demons are going to live as well. Are demons living there right now? I don't know. They probably are. But are the demon goats there? I don't know. Let's go to the next set of scriptures. We're not done yet, folks. There's a lot more verses in here we got to cover. Chapter 14 of Isaiah. Go to verse 22 and 24. So next chapter over. Pastor Cooper, would you like to read that out loud? 22 through 24.
all right. And I shall rise up against them, saith Jehovah of hosts, and cut off from Babylon name and remnant and son and son's son, saith Jehovah. I will also make it a possession for the porcupine and pools of water, and I will sweep it with the besom of destruction, saith Jehovah of hosts. Jehovah of hosts hath sworn, saying, surely, as I have thought, so shall it come to pass, and as I have purposed, so shall it stand.
Amen. Amen. So a sudden, complete destruction comes upon Babylon. Well, Babylon in the history, the last time we've seen Babylon just was dissolved. People just left. They left it alone. They weren't destroyed. It wasn't destroyed at all. And the ruins are still there today. So it seems like there's still some question marks about this city of Babylon. Huh? Let's go to the next set of scriptures. Jeremiah now, chapter 51. Jeremiah chapter 51. We're looking at verse 6 through 10. So, Howard, if you can get there, I'd like you to read out real loud. You got a nice loud voice.
Which one's Rich?
Jeremiah 51. So turn to Jeremiah 51, verse 6 through 10.
Okay.
Nice and loud.
Flee from Babylon, run for your lives. Do not be destroyed because of her sins. It is time for the Lord's vengeance. He will repay her what she deserves. Babylon was a gold cup in the Lord's hand. She made the whole earth drunk. The nations drank her wine. Therefore they have now gone mad. Babylon will suddenly fall and be broken. Wail over her. Get balm for her pain. Perhaps she can be healed. We would have healed Babylon, but she cannot be healed. Let us leave her and each go to our own land. For her judgment reaches to the skies. It rises as high as the heavens. The Lord has vindicated us. Come, let us tell in Zion what the Lord our God has done.
Yes. So, that's good. So in verse 6, you see God is telling the Jewish people to flee from the midst of Babylon. But at the time with Jeremiah, the Jewish people were slaves in Babylon. How could they leave? They couldn't leave at that time. Babylon was overthrown. But it was by a group of people that just snuck into the city, through the rivers, and were able to overtake Babylon that way. Verse 9 and 10, verse 8 actually, suddenly Babylon has fallen and been broken. There's a sudden destruction upon her. Verse 9 says, for a judgment has reached to heaven. It seems that that's speaking of a destruction, by fire, by, God's destruction. Verse 10, God's brought about our vindication, concerning Babylon. So it seems to show that there's going to be a destruction against the city. But like we said today, there is no Babylon. It's in ruins. So does it have to be rebuilt? That's another question. Can it be rebuilt? And when can it be rebuilt? Think about that as we go to the next set of scriptures. Let's go to 24 through 26, same chapter.
Is your volume all the way up?
Yes, verse 24 to 26. Who wants to read? Next.
I'll read it.
All right, read out real loud, please.
24, 26.
Yes, 24 to 26.
And I will repay Babylon and all the inhabitants of Chaldea for all the evil they have done in Zion in your sight, says the Lord. Behold, I am against you, O destroying mountain, who destroys all the earth, says the Lord. And I will stretch out my hand against you, roll you down from rocks, and make you a burned mountain. They shall not take from you a stone for a corner, not a stone for a foundation, but you shall be desolate forever, says the Lord.
Yes, amen. All right, so that sounds like it's burning, right? It's a burning mountain, and no stone will be untouched and desolate forever. Well, it's been desolate for a long time now. So some of these prophecies are fulfilled. Some of them are not. Verse 48, same chapter. Jump to that one. The reason why Babylon's going to go down. Here, I'll read it out loud. Then heaven and earth and all that is in them will shout for joy over Babylon, for the destroyers will come to her from the north, declares the Lord. Heaven and earth are going to rejoice over this destruction of Babylon. Well, isn't that similar to the book of Revelation, chapter 18? You see similarities there?
Yep.
Yeah, that's for sure. Now let's go to 61 through 64, our final sections here to read. Sections 60 verses 61 through 64. Jeremiah chapter 51. So who wants to read that? Read it out loud, please. This is Jeremiah to his servant. He sent his servant to go up to Babylon and to give them a message for him. And Sariah is the servant.
He said to Sariah, when you get to Babylon, see that you read all these words aloud. Then say, Lord, you have said you will destroy this place, so that neither people nor animals will live in it. It will be desolate forever. When you finish reading this scroll, tie a stone to it and throw it into the Euphrates. Then say, so will Babylon sink to rise no more because of disaster. And bring and her people will fall. The words of Jeremiah and Peter.
Jeremiah the prophet, right? He prophesied here that that Babylon is going to fall. And it's going to fall like a stone being thrown into a river. So that's a pretty desolate type of destruction, calamity, as he's saying here, right? So, and it's not going to rise again. Well, that can't be talking about the 689 BC raising, because it rose after that. 275 BC, it was a desolate city then, but then it rose again. So, can it rise again? It's already risen a couple times in its history. It seems to me, when you go through these scriptures, here Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, when you see these prophecies of these cities like Tyre and these other countries, and the destruction that is cast upon them doesn't always happen right away. And it can be also, some of it can be just destruction upon those cities in the end times as well. Sometimes it's a progressive type of thing. Like here in Babylon. I mean, some of this is true right now, isn't it? Babylon is no longer, it's been destroyed, right? There's no people living in it. There's just animals and possibly demons living in it as well, but it was never a flame, right? It didn't die like Sodom and Gomorrah, for, destruction from heaven to earth, So that's what kind of leaves open the question marks. And we see the connections. There's definite connections with these scriptures in Revelation 18. We see that for sure. The day of the Lord is spoken in Isaiah 13. And the other connections as we went through it. So, Arnold Fruchterbaum teaches that the city of Babylon has to be rebuilt. So if that is true, then when can it be rebuilt? When will it be rebuilt? What do you think?
Probably during the tribulation period, when Antichrist is in control.
That makes sense, right? Maybe the first half of the tribulation period, when Anti-Messiah is winning the wars against the other kingdoms, and he begins to build it. He begins to build a city. How long does it take to build a city?
That's not my department.
3.5 years.
It depends on the ways you have.
Depends on how much money you got too, right? And how many people are working for you. But here's
Donald Trump. I'd ask Donald Trump. He knows how to do it.
Yeah. Well, here I looked up Dubai. I think, Dubai was an old city, but then all of a sudden it became a modern city. And I was like, okay, I was intrigued by that. Let's check out Dubai. Dubai, they built Dubai in 10 years, from 2001 to 2011. And they modernized it within 10 years. And Dubai is like the place to go in the, in the Middle East. If you're Muslim and not as religious as, as the others, so that's like the place to go. Plus, they've got a lot of golfing tournaments there now, it seems. You know, you go to Dubai, you golf. But it's very modernized, very beautiful, and they built it very quickly. And that was back in 2000, now it's 2020. You know, in the future, how quickly can they build a building, especially with the anti-Messiah in charge, and all his demons, and, you know, all the demonic spirits around helping. So I think they can get it done pretty quick, if they have to, you know. And if you were the anti-Messiah, would you want to have your headquarters in Babylon?
Well, it is going to be his headquarters, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the actual city of Babylon instead of it being Rome or something else.
Yeah, I think so, because that's where that rebellion started, the Tower of Babel.
That's where the rebellion started in the beginning. So yeah, Satan has a home in Babel already, right from the beginning. So, you know, he had a little home there because of him messing up with Adam and Eve, you know, in the garden. But the garden was then basically destroyed, you know, in the flood. So after that, after the flood, where was Satan's home on earth? I would say Babel. At least one of them, you know. I mean, Las Vegas is one. We know that, right?
Yeah.
I shut that down pretty quick. He shut down Las Vegas in a day.
Yeah. Who'd have thought, right? Who'd have thought? So Babylon's going to be shut down in a day as well, as it says in the scriptures here. But I don't think it's going to be pestilence. I think it's going to be fire from heaven, fire and brimstone, just like it says. The connection there being with Sodom and Gomorrah. So, well, here's my conclusion now about Babylon the Great. Started out in chapter 17. Babylon the Great is the one world religion, and probably governed by the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope, headquartered in Rome. That dies at mid-trib. Anti-Messiah and his 10 kings destroy it because they hate it by that time. You know, because they're worshiping idols and worshiping, you know, images instead of worshiping him. He turns the one world religion to worship him, and it's called the Babylon the Great now in chapter 18. He moves it as a one world religion and a one world government, his government, and a commerce as well, stationed in a rebuilt city of Babylon. It dies at the second coming of Yeshua, and it will never be rebuilt then, never lived in by humans again, and only demons and animals will live there. So we got to finish out the rest of the chapter to get some of that information at the end there. But that's kind of where I'm leaning in this situation. But I can tell you one thing. This is one of the more difficult situations in understanding of Babylon because of what's coming up in the next verses. So let's go back to Revelation chapter 18. We're going to try and finish out the chapter. And verse 11 and 12. So Revelation 18.
Okay. What about the geographical sense? If we say Rome, it will be in Europe. I thought that Babylon should be around Middle East.
Revelation is the book of Revelation is throughout the world, but yes, it's also in the Middle East and it's in Israel. Yeah. So if it's Babylon, well then that's the Middle East, that's Iraq. So yeah. But remember the Roman Empire is revived. It's the Roman Empire. So Rome is its headquarters. Back then, way back then. So it doesn't have to be the headquarters this time around, but it probably will be, because you're going to have the Vatican there as well. And there's always been a battle between the Vatican and the emperors for power over the world in church history.
Is going to do away with false religion.
Yes, the anti-Messiah will get rid of that false religion at mid-trib when he becomes the king. So,
Right, so
yeah.
the headquarters don't have to be in Rome.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, no. It doesn't. But if it is, then he's going to wipe it out. Not the city necessarily, just the religion, you see. And then move his headquarters to wherever he wants it to be, which here in Revelation, it's talking about Babylon. So that's why we're trying to figure out, is Babylon Rome? Is Babylon the Great an actual rebuilt city of Babylon? And here in 18, that's what I lean towards as the answer. So, okay, who wants to read verse 11 and 12? I'm sorry.
You lean towards Rome. You lean towards Rome.
No, I'm leaning towards Babylon, rebuilt city of Babylon, because the anti-Messiah, especially in the first half of the tribulation, can rebuild the city of Babylon. It doesn't have to be a big city, but the connections I see with Tanakh, all those verses we just read, it makes sense that it's a rebuilt Babylon.
Well, the main thing for me is the Euphrates River dries up. That's when he moves his allied forces to this side, and then we blow it up.
Mm-hmm. We're going to read it. We're going to study that right now. All right, David. David's giving you all a clue about what's coming. That's okay, no problem. Verse 11 and 12, guys. Who wants to read it? Let's start over.
I'll read it.
All right.
And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object, most precious wood, bronze, iron, marble.
Great. Yeah, that's a lot of items there, and they're all very rich items, are they not? Pretty much everything on that list is very exotic type of items for rich people to be buying. So, but this is now the second group of mourners. The first group is the kings of the earth. Second group are the merchants. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her, the great city Babylon. Why are they weeping? Because they got very rich. They're buying and selling all of these items through this great city of Babylon, right? So they're luxury items. Look at gold and silver, precious stones, pearls, purple, fine linen, scarlet, citron, right? Citron wood and bronze and marble. Verse 13. I'll read that one. Cinnamon and spice and incense, perfume, frankincense and wine and olive oil, fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep and cargoes of horses and chariots and slaves and human lives. So a whole lot of things are being sold and resold through this one world religion, one world government, and it's basically a one world commerce as well, that anti-Messiah is now in charge of in the city of Babylon, whatever city that is. So, but look at the end of 13. Slaves, you got chariots, slaves, and human lives. These chariots are the four-wheeled chariots that you see in the movies. The movies back about the Israelites or, about Egypt, those kind of things. And they were used for transporting kings and the wealthy. So, very wealthy wagons here, chariots, slaves, and human lives. People talk about, well, there's no slaves, right? There's no human beings being bought and sold. Is that true?
Oh, that's happening.
Happens every day.
Yeah. All over the world there are slaves. Can you believe that? In the 2020. And there are children that are being bought and sold as sex slaves. I mean, here in Las Vegas, it's really bad. It's throughout the world, though. And so those are the kinds of things we need to be praying as well about. But, people say, well, slavery's done, but no, it isn't. It is alive and well. And it's definitely going to be a part of this one world government, one world order situation, because they want people to be slaves. They want people to be poor. That way they can control them. And that's why I think you're seeing this dramatic attack, really, from the left, against all these states, United States, trying to keep them, locked down and poor, and they're still. I mean, we're hearing about people that are having difficulty. They can't pay the rent, and so the owners of their apartments are trying to get them kicked out. But supposedly you're not supposed to be able to do that because of this coronavirus situation. But no, it's still happening out there, folks. and people are being attacked, and everybody wants their bills being paid because everybody's hurting. So, yeah, are there slaves out there? Oh yeah, there are going to be a lot more slaves as time goes on if things don't change. These other countries that are having...
Why is there a distinction between slaves and souls? Why, or lives, as your translation said? Slaves are already lives. Why?
Well, back then, I guess there was a distinction, but I think with us today, there's no distinction. It's just human beings that are being slaves, yeah. Yeah, that's the way I'm looking at it. So there's really no distinction between those two, Rich.
Okay.
Yeah. So, pretty bad, huh? Pretty bad stuff here, and it's sad to see, even 2,000 years ago, when John wrote this, around 95 AD, and projecting way into the future that there was still slavery going on. Horrible, just terrible. We're supposed to be in a technological age here, and why we have slaves? So, just a terrible thing.
Can it be figuratively slaves, like slave to your job, slave to your, like, doesn't have to be physical slave, does it?
Yeah, it does, because you're a list. Look at all the other items. Cinnamon, I don't think we look at that as a metaphor. Horses, it's not a metaphor. Chariots, not a metaphor. Sheep, wheat, fine flour. So there's no reason to take it when it's in a list like that. In the Greek, you take it literally. If all the rest are literal, then the ends are, all of them are literal. So slaves and human lives, that's pretty literal. Yeah. That's why I say it's pretty bad. It's terrible to even just think about it, because it's a terrible, terrible situation. So, all right, let's move on. Verse 14 and 15.
14 and 15.
Yep.
The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you, and all the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all.
Mm-hmm.
The merchants of these things, who became rich by her, will stand at a distance for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing.
Amen. Mourning, yeah. So they're weeping and mourning over the city of Babylon. They're actually tormented, it says here, right? They've lost all these luxurious items, the gold, the silver, and everything else. And these merchants who became rich are now looking at themselves like, uh-oh, we just lost our businesses, right? In one day. Just kind of like everybody here in Las Vegas and, United States when the shutdown came. Not everybody's business, but a lot of people's businesses were shut down. But here, the city of Babylon is going to be destroyed by fire, right? And fire and brimstone, most likely, the brimstone part. Huge judgment coming. And this judgment, though, of the city has never taken place in her history. The way it's being described here in Revelation, chapter 18. But they're very scared about the Babylon, because it's wiped out. Right? Let's go to the next verse, 16. David, you read that, please.
And saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple, scarlet, and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls.
And just read 17 too.
For in 1 hour such great riches came to nothing. Every shipmaster, all who travel by ship, sailors, and as of trade on the sea, stood at a distance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So this is the situation here now. Babylon's extravagance and wealth is completely wiped out. Wiped out in 1 hour, right? So that's God's judgment, and coming from heaven, fire, brimstone, has to be. But then it says something very interesting, right? Every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor making their living by the sea stood at a distance. What does that tell you about Babylon?
Well, it was great. center of trade.
Of trade, but how is the trade getting to the city?
Euphrates River?
By the Euphrates River. Big ships can get to the Euphrates River?
No. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So where does this city need to be?
Rome.
Technically, I think it needs to be by a ocean
Right.
or a big lake that's close to an ocean. Okay? So, let's see. Rome is a port city. Rome is only like 10 miles away from the ocean. Babylon, Iraq, is along the Euphrates River, and today it is approximately 300 miles away from the Persian Gulf. Now I say approximately because I don't know exactly where Babylon is in Iraq, but I was going by just things I could find out on the maps, on the internet. So it's approximately 300 miles away. So, interesting. Do ships go along the Euphrates River? Well, I don't think so, number one. But
Yeah.
something that David said, isn't the Euphrates River dried up by this time?
But maybe those ships were able to see the destruction far off. I mean, this is
Yeah, it says stood at a distance. So what's that distance? How
Yeah.
far?
How far is the distance?
I mean, it could be 300 miles. That this destruction is huge.
Can you see that from 300 miles away?
That's what it's described here. I think it's possible.
Is it possible? It's possible, I guess. I don't know. Now, can they see from the ocean, the Persian Gulf, 300 miles away from a boat?
Why not? This is like Sodom and Gomorrah. It's going to be huge.
Yeah. If the city is huge, remember they only got a short time to build it. So how big is it going to be? We don't know. We just know it's going to be the headquarters of Anti-Messiah. So it's all very interesting. I find it fascinating. I'm just perplexed as well as you guys are, so it's amazing. But remember, the Euphrates River is dried up by the sixth bull in chapter 16, verse 12. So Babylon, the destruction of Babylon falls after the seventh bull.
Right.
So these sailors, if this was the sixth bull, they'd be mourning by the sixth bull, and they're not. So there's a problem with Babylon actually being Babylon. Is the city big enough when it's wiped out to be able to see 300 miles away from a boat? A big ship? I don't know. I don't know how mountainous Iraq is. I hear it is pretty mountainous.
If it's going to be the headquarters of the Antichrist, why wouldn't it be very big?
Just because of the amount of time it'll take to build it, that's all. Yeah. But it's not necessarily a headquarters for his armies. It's a headquarters for his generals, that kind of thing. But who knows, Rich? You may be right. You may be able to see it from that far away. I don't know. All I'm saying is that this brings a problem. It makes it a problem to be 100% sure that Babylon is actually talking about the city of Babylon, rebuilt Babylon. It's not a major problem. It's a little problem, though. Let's read on, verse 18 and 19. Rich, why don't you read that one? You'll be next.
And cried out as they looked upon the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like the great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping, mourning, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, wherein all that had their ships in the sea were made rich by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate.
Says it again, in 1 hour. That means sudden destruction, right? And a great destruction, quick destruction upon the city. So they're obviously very, very upset. Smoke is coming from the burning, so she is on fire. And it's destruction. So, how do they all become very rich if that city is 300 miles away from the ocean? I mean, typically when you do business by ship. You want the city close by, so it's quick in, quick out, and then you're back out on the sea going to your next city. So, but like Rich said, you just never know. It still could be, it could
But
be a rebuilt city.
But the reason I think it's the city is because the Chaldeans are mentioned in a couple of places.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Nebuchadnezzar was.
That's a strong connection. Yeah, Chaldeans, the strong connection as well. Just not everything lines up, so that's why we're a little perplexed. Verse 20. Howard, you want to read verse 20?
Rejoice over her, you heavens. Rejoice, you people of God. Rejoice, apostles and prophets. For God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you.
Yeah, right? Amen. So while three groups are mourning over Babylon, now we see three groups rejoicing in heaven over Babylon. All those who are in heaven, the holy ones, the saints, and then specifically the apostles and the prophets. So God's perspective here, while the world mourns, heaven rejoices. And, she's obviously being judged righteously by the Lord. But here's an interesting note. This also shows the prophets of old prophesied that Babylon was to be completely destroyed. So the connection again goes back to these prophets from the Tanakh. So who would they be? We covered two. Jeremiah and Isaiah, yeah. So the verses that we just read in Jeremiah and Isaiah are now being stated here in verse 20 that these prophets, right, and the apostles and the prophets are now rejoicing in heaven because their words are what? Being fulfilled. Finally. So there's another connection with Babylon being the actual city of Babylon, a rebuilt city of Babylon. There's a lot of connections there with that. There's only that one that just makes it difficult, with it not being a coastal city. Verse 21, 21 please.
The mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large milestone and threw into the sea and said, with such violence, the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so didn't we just read that in Jeremiah 51? Same thing, stone. Then be thrown down into the water with such violence. So that's taken right from Jeremiah 51. It's not an actual fulfillment, but it's similar. And then finally, the last three verses. David, would you read those, 22 through 24?
Yeah. The light of the lamp shall not shine in you anymore, and the voice of the bridegroom
Verse
and the
22,
bride shall
sorry.
not be heard.
Start in verse 22.
Oh. The sound of the harpist, musician, flutist, and trumpeter shall not be heard in you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
No craftsman of any craft shall be found in you anymore. And the sound of a milestone shall not be heard in you anymore. The light of a lamp shall not shine in you anymore. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall not be heard in you anymore. For your merchants were like the great men of the earth, for by her sorcery all the nations were deceived. And in her was found blood of the prophets and saints, and of all who were slain on the earth.
So why was Babylon the great judged? Two reasons: sorcery, spiritual sorcery, right? And the blood of the prophets and saints slain on the earth. So God finally judged and judged them dramatically, so that the whole world would see, or at least the whole world would know, and that God would be glorified in the end. That's the ultimate when it comes to judgment. So, Babylon the Great, is she a revived city of Babylon? Rebuilt city of Babylon? Is she Rome? Or is she another great city? that the anti-Messiah has as a headquarters, not only for his one world religion, but as also his one world commerce and one world government. What's your votes, folks?
I think it's a rebuilt city.
Rebuilt city for Rich. What do you guys
I'm
think?
undecided.
Undecided is fine.
There's limited support both. I mean, I agree with, it says that why the Euphrates River is dried up to move the army of across.
That's right.
So, I mean, I guess I lean towards that, but when Peter uses it, he uses it as a metaphor as Rome.
Possible. City of Babylon was still standing there in the 1st century, and Christians.
It's a big connection.
It wasn't a great big city in the 1st century and 2nd century. It was just a city. It wasn't as great as it was in Bible times, Old Testament times. So when Peter was writing about it, that was 1st century. So,
Right, and it was like a code, maybe. He was
Could've been.
writing. He didn't want them to know that there was Christians in Rome.
It could have been a code, yes. Could have been a code for Rome. Anybody else? What do you guys think?
Is Peter giving us a hint there?
It's
I don't
possible.
know. I'd like to leave it open.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Samson, what do you think?
For me, we think Babylon rebuilt. Babylon rebuilt. What is that?
You think it's rebuilt? Rebuilt Babylon? Okay. Howard, what do you think?
I don't know. I keep thinking about it having to be close to the sea. That
Yeah.
would have been monumental for them. There's no way that they could go 200-300 miles and be merchants.
Mhm. That makes it very difficult, doesn't it? You're coming from the business side, right? You know. I mean, when you travel by boat, from country to country, and then you got to go another 300 miles. That's a lot of money, right?
Well, the slaves would have never made it that far on foot or however they were getting there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Maybe by that time there'll be mass transportation. What they wanted to build that train in California.
Maybe there will be an earthquake and there will be a sea by Babylon.
Maybe there'll be a speed train, right? The bullet train going all the way from Persian Gulf to Babylon, huh? Tara, what do you think?
I don't think, for me, mathematically speaking, it is possible to see 300 miles away. Like from here to LA, there's no way we can see.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way we can see that, what's going on in LA from here.
Right.
So, I don't know. No idea.
It's definitely perplexing, I'll tell you. As a Bible teacher for 25 years, this is probably one of the bigger question marks still. I lean towards having a rebuilt Babylon, and but that that verse about the shipmasters and the passengers and the ships, the sailors, makes me question that too. So.
That's it. Go ahead. No, but what I'm saying is, for instance, during that time, we don't know, maybe the river Euphrates could be big, and also the ship size, it's not like the ones we have now, the huge ones. Maybe when it says ship at that time, ship could be something a bit greater than boat. We don't know.
Well, I doubt it, to be honest with you, because look at all the cargo that's going on these ships. We just went through lists and lists and lists of stuff.
But the population was small, see, Pastor. At that time, the population was small, so.
It's smaller, yeah, but not that much smaller. I mean, yeah, it'll be half. Well, by the end of the trip period, it'll be, you're right, it'll be a lot smaller. There'll still be billions around, but it won't be that much. You're right. But remember, the Euphrates River is dried up by this time, too, at the end. So the drying up of the Euphrates is not a factor in them them mourning the city. It's the destruction of the city that they're mourning, you know. So if the river dries up and they actually are if they're doing their transportation down the river, which I highly doubt, then they'd be really upset when the river dries up, you know. So that doesn't jive too much to me.
At that place there are two rivers, Euphrates and Tigris. So maybe when one is dry, the other, the Tigris might work. You see, there are two rivers that are.
The Tigris is to the north of Babylon, so yeah.
Maybe when we're up in heaven, we can ask the Lord what's going on down there.
I think that's a good idea. So let's end with that, Pastor Cooper.
We're going to get full knowledge.
Yes.
Right.
Well, we pray, and then we'll talk some more about it, but we'll end our Facebook Live. So, Pastor Cooper, pray first, please.
Well, Heavenly Father, Lord, we see from these prophecies given to John that there's really only two directions that people can go in. Either we're going toward God or away from God. People are setting their course right now as we speak. And Lord, your warnings have been around for a long time. And also you're allowing things to happen now right in front of our eyes that are warnings as well. One of them being this coronavirus, trying to get people's attention. And so, Lord, those of us who are walking toward God, toward Jesus, toward Yeshua for salvation, we believe will not be in this period. But those who are ignoring the gospel, if they ignore the gospel too long, either while they're still alive and then pass away before the tribulation, then they will be separated from you forever. But those who go into the tribulation not knowing you are in for a very hard time, as we can see. So Lord, our job right now is to warn people, to give the gospel out to anybody that we come across. And so Lord, help us to be about your business here, because there is nothing more important. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen. So we're gonna say to our Facebook Live friends, if you guys have thoughts about our study tonight, insights, then please post and let us know what you think about this whole Babylon situation, Babylon the Great. We'd love to hear from you. And we'll see you next time, Friday night at the service, and then next Monday as well. We'll be back on Facebook Live as well. But if anybody wants to be saved, if anybody has a heart for Yeshua, if you know you're a sinner, you need a Savior, you need a Lord, then you need to receive Yeshua now. Do it right now. Post, let us know. I'd be happy to talk with you and lead you into a stronger relationship with the Lord, okay? So let us know, okay? Shalom, everybody. We love you. God bless. Next time.